Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be something different. It's going to be something that the spotlight should be shone upon because of what is occurring in the world today. Now, 2020 hasn't been a great year. That's pretty obvious. We've been in lockdown, we've seen war on the brink, and we've seen terrible atrocities taking place across the world. But this week in particular stands out as something that has been bubbling for some time, and it is the death of George Floyd, which shocked the globe. The images that we've seen have shocked the globe. Now, today we're going to talk about things that many people find uncomfortable to discuss, but it needs to be talked about. And a lot of people seem to get this message confused about the Black Lives Matter movement and the history of which it comes from and what is taking place today. It's a very confusing sort of cesspit of, are these protesters or these violent looters the same thing as the Black Lives Matter movements? You know, this is not the message that they're trying to portray. And I'm going to do them a favor in helping this cause by doing my part and not staying silent. So I'm going to discuss several issues that have taken place since the formation of America, essentially. And I've chosen America in particular because it seems to be an issue that doesn't go away. I'm not saying it goes away where I live, but it's put into the mainstream media so much more than where I'm from and in other countries. So America itself was founded upon several empires, from the French, the Spanish, and the British. Its economy was built over slavery, and it has seemed to have failed to move on from these sort of historic and backwards times. Not saying that slavery is still around, which it isn't in America, or at least it isn't legally like it was back then. But it seems like this sort of the systematic process of where the white man seems to come out on top every single time over the black man. And it's an issue that I feel like it must be discussed now before things get out of hand further. In my opinion, in which this is my opinion, um, hopefully will be viewed upon by many. Whoever views this video, hopefully people do, and they understand that this needs to be talked about. They can relate in what I'm about to discuss. So, moving on from the early stages of American history, passing the Civil War about slavery, moving in towards the more 19th, 20th century. We'll focus on that sort of time frame for the moment, and we're going to look at post Second World War, pre Second World War, post Second World War, right the way up to the year of 1991, which is an important year, which I will get to in a very short moment. I really do want to talk about something that's led to America being institutionally racist. And a lot of people, like Ben Shapiro, disagree with this, which I saw in one of his recent videos that he said that America isn't institutionally racist. It's an argumentative um, debacle, we'll say, in a formal sense, which I think is completely wrong. America is literally based, its foundations are from the suffering of one community in particular, which is the African American community. Now, Jim Crow laws is something I'm going to really quickly discuss, and a lot of people might not know what this is because they may have not done history or they may not be aware of American history during the 20th century. But I'm going to put it into a quick summary for you just to make sure that things are cleared up and it gives you a sort of idea as to why America today still seems like it is back then. So the Jim Crow laws segregated the black and white man, black and white women, black and white children from doing activities that we think today are of basic right. So drinking the same water fountains were segregated, getting on the same public transport was segregated, going to the same schools was segregated, playing for the same sports teams was segregated, voting in the same elections was segregated. The black man that we know today is a figure of great resilience and should be respected in comparison to the white man that we see now. It's a very broad statement I've just made, but I'm going to explain it a little bit closer. So the Jim Crow laws sparked a civil rights movement. It's led to this sort of fire in the hearts of many, not just black, but those who had the common sense to see past this racial injustice and notice that skin color means nothing. We are all human. We are all one people, and that's how it should always be seen. We shouldn't be separated by barriers and labels. But this is what happened in an America that was very twisted and corrupted at the time. Education was being fed to these young white people that black people were different and should be treated differently. And many brave Americans and other people from across the globe, because I know many traveled to America to help with these protests, these peaceful protests, and which we'll get to later as well, led to something so powerful. And I chose one image that, to me personally, signifies the movement itself. Now, in the top left corner of your screen, you should see an image of a black man being held by a white police officer whilst he's being viciously attacked by police dogs. And I see this as something that has many meanings behind it. Notice the lack of fight from the black man to show that he does not have to raise the same levels as those prosecuting him for the crimes that he isn't committing. He's committing no crime. He's fighting for what he believes in, and this belief is strongly shared by a large part of the population. The jaws of the dog represent the jaws of the justice system around the throats of American people being incarcerated for things that they've never done, being lynched, being beaten in the street, not being able to do the basic things that humans should be able to do. Now, the Jim Crow laws, in my opinion, still create some sort of base for people today to racially separate black people and white people. They can be seen in the justice system, they can be seen in the local authorities, the police. It's something that still frequently occurs. Segregation still occurs. Now we're going to move on in time, post civil rights movement, to the year 1991. In the center of your screen, you should see a dark image of a vehicle and the silhouettes of several police officers with a man on the ground. That gentleman there is Rodney King. Rodney King was an unarmed black man who was stopped by police, was removed from his vehicle, and was struck several times by police batons and was viciously assaulted. Caught on camera and sent to local newsagents, sent to the world, sparked riots all across California, it sparked protests all across America, and it sparked a movement all across the world for racial equality. Thankfully, Rodney King survived this incident and published his memoirs about what he experienced and how this sparked a movement that we can see today is something so powerful and so motivational to push for the right cause. But what we have seen since the Rodney King incident is something that we should have progressed from. It should have been tackled at the root right there and then. All police officers should have been made aware of this, should have been taught to deal with mental health issues, to deal with inequality, and to deal with unemployment and poverty. These issues are what stems and what is deeply rooted in America as to why black people seem to be stuck in a cycle of racial injustice. Now we move on from Rodney King, and several hundreds of cases emerged of racial discrimination towards black people. Some stand out more than others. In the bottom left hand of your screen, you see "Hands up, don't shoot." And next to that, a young black gentleman lying face down in the road with blood streaming from his body. He was left there for hours. Michael Brown was killed by a white police officer. He was unarmed. He stood in the middle of the road and was shot several times. It sparked wide protest and violence. It's another staple in the Black Lives Matter movement as to how little progress has been made by the American justice system, by the American government, by local authorities, by state authorities, and by federal authorities to deal with the institutionalized racism that is embedded in their police services, in their local authorities, and in their local justice systems since these Jim Crow laws, since slavery, since the foundations of America. At the top of your screen, you see Eric Garner, a large gentleman detained by several police officers, one of which has his hand around his neck or his arm around his neck in a chokehold, and the phrase "I can't breathe" was shouted several times to the deaf ears of these police officers. What shocks me the most is that the deaf ears remain deaf. They believe that what they had done is right. The use of force was used appropriately. Sparked more riots, sparked more violence, and has led to this moment now that we see with George Floyd. Now, there are a couple of other things I want to talk about today in this video. The cornerstones of the Black Lives Matter movement, none of them represent what we've seen today and in the past week of violent protests and uprising all across America. There is no uprising. There is no revolution against the government. There is only the idea of racial equality, which should be heard more than anything else. What we are seeing is similar to what we saw in the 1990s. Violence, murder, looting. It's a terrifying experience. It was distressing images I saw today of a young girl who had been maced with tear gas and had to be assisted by several people trying to get it out of her eyes and out of her mouth as she screamed in agony as her face was burning, her eyes were burning. How is this an acceptable method of dealing with such an important issue, something so deeply embedded in American history that still hasn't been sorted, that still hasn't been changed and revolutionized to deal with the injustices that are taking place all across the greatest country in the world, in inverted commas, that has one of the highest populations of prisoners in the world, the highest unemployment in the world, the highest levels of segregation in the world. And you can say, how is it segregation, Greg? Well, just look at what's going on. It's become a black versus white movement again. And now, an interesting tweet was released by Vanessa Bryant previous to this incident, but it's still so vocal today that yes, all lives matter is the equivalent of saying all neighborhoods matter, but one neighborhood's on fire and it's being ignored because everyone's the same. Essentially, is the message I gathered from that tweet. It can be read differently, but this is the way I see it. This is a fire that can't be ignored any longer because it's starting to burn the feet of the American government. It's starting to burn the traditional chains that have kept the black population down. It's kept them in these poverty cycles, that has kept them from being treated as equals. It's more than skin. It's more than race. It's more than gender. It's more than religion. It's a concept that many men will never understand, that equality is something that must be achieved so the human race can move forward. So we no longer face war, no longer face violence and protests like we have seen. No longer should we see men face down in the street, unarmed, being violently murdered. Now, a horrible statistic that I saw was that 99% of police officers who have committed a crime, it is a crime, who have shot a black man, 99% of them weren't incarcerated. It's what sparked the Rodney King riots, and it's what led to the eventual incarceration of these officers. Violent protest is what it took. Not peaceful protest, not simple evidence. It took violence, it took death, it took injury, it took mass economic damage. Hundreds of millions of dollars of damage done in the Rodney King incident. And yet, we're going in circles. We're not seeing progress. We're not seeing this 5.6% unemployment rate drop to below the American average. We're not seeing the population of prisoners who are black decreasing. We're not seeing a decrease in shootings in America. We're not seeing progress. We're seeing devolution. We're seeing the lack of intent of moving forward. We're seeing the president doing nothing. Yes, the mobilization of the National Guard and the army was something, but it just symbolizes how they want to quell these movements. Yes, it can be dangerous, and it shouldn't have to escalate to this. If things were done straight away rather than letting this escalate and spiral out of control, then we wouldn't need the National Guard mobilized. We wouldn't need you mocking left wing groups, labeling them as terrorist organizations. And yes, some can be extreme, but if you're not labeling these right wing fascist groups as terrorist organizations, then you have no ground to stand on. A man who's defended racial injustice. It goes all the way to the very top. And how do you expect these people labeled at the very bottom as failures to move up on the ladder of success? It takes a miracle. A great man, Barack Obama, who took the world by storm by becoming the first ever black president, is an example of that. But he wasn't just a miracle, he was a man who worked through all these racial barriers. Didn't stop when it was when everything was against him. And even with an incredibly biased government, he still made progress in the right direction. He's still an icon. He's still someone who you should look up to as to say, well, if you can move past this injustice, then why can't we just conquer the American fear of moving forward? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all stay safe during this turbulent time. I hope to see progress. I hope to see peace resume. I don't want to see another dead body lying in the street. I don't want to see these banners saying Black Lives Matter, because they shouldn't have to be up, because we know this. We know this. It's ingrained in our brains because we should know from the get-go that no matter what the skin color is, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, age, nobody should be treated differently because of the pigment of their skin, because of their beliefs, because of how they feel. It is wrong. It is wrong. Now, I'm not a religious man, but I pray for those who are suffering at the hands of racial injustice all across the globe. I wish you safe passage through your travels in life. All the troubles you may face, all the hurdles that are set in front of you to stop you from moving up. America is a prime example of a country that is deemed so great, but is stuck in a backward spiral that they can't escape from because the failure to move forward, the failure to invest in education, the failure to invest in infrastructure and to help minorities move up in the world. They keep them down, they build walls, they build barriers to keep them out. Labels can't stop this movement. I've done my part. I will not stay silent during this. I may stay thousands of miles away, but I refuse to lay down and die as men, brothers, sisters of the same human race die around us. Bless you all during these difficult times. and all the best in your campaign for racial equality, for justice, and for peace. Thank you very much.